Of all the current auto rifles in this meta, the Summoner has actually become my main go-to auto rifle, and I think it's actually still competitive with the exotic auto rifles despite being a legendary auto. To start, let's gloss over the main key points and strengths of the Summoner. Firstly, it has barrels, which allow you to get increased recoil direction control, things like arrowhead break, which is very valuable on an auto rifle, and as much as stability is important, it's perhaps not as important as having a manageable recoil pattern. Something that's usually or mostly entirely vertical is going to be the most important factor. Arrowhead break in combination with a counterbalance mod boosts this auto rifle to 100 recoil direction, which is mainly entirely vertical recoil, and with more predictable recoil you'll be able to land shots easier without so much having to worry about your shots randomly and awkwardly drifting to the left or right. The Summoner also has ricochet rounds available on it for an all-around stat boost in two categories that are pretty influential: stability and range. The Summoner also gets moving target, which gives you increased strafe speed and aim assist, and this is one of the most important points to this weapon, and I'll be talking about that more in just a moment. The last key point of the Summoner is that it has elemental capacitor available on it, which gives you essentially a chunk of free stats, whether that be something like stability, which is the most beneficial, or handling, which would be second to that. It can also get rampage, of course, for just a basic TTK boost, but if you do want a bit more range and don't mind the slight increase to zoom, you can also get rangefinder. But the most important thing about all this is these are all perks and factors that combine and stack together on the weapon, which makes it all around just such a great auto rifle. My ideal role on the Summoner, what I believe is the god role of this weapon, involves arrowhead break, ricochet rounds, moving target, either elemental capacitor, rampage, or rangefinder, your pick, and a range masterwork. This gives it the stats of 61 range, 57 stability, 83 handling, 62 aim assist, 87 recoil direction, which by itself, without a counterbalance mod, would have the recoil consistently and slightly tilt left, but mainly be vertical, but again still have a bit of that left tilt. If you add the counterbalance mod to give it plus 15 recoil, it will have a recoil direction stat of 100, giving you mainly vertical recoil. Another legendary auto rifle that many tell me would compare to the Summoner would be the Galliard, the Black Armory version. My god rule of this would involve SLO 10 post for plus 5 range, plus 10 handling, and no zoom addition, ricochet rounds, quick draw, moving target, and a range masterwork, giving it stats of 61 range, 60 stability, 56 handling, but it's got quick draw, so it's pretty much 100, 60 aim assist, 70 recoil, which by itself would consistently have a left tilt to it. However, if you add a counterbalance mod, it will be mainly vertical with an 85 recoil stat, but it'll still have some left and right deviance. These two autos have very comparable stats, but the difference is the Summoner can get to 100 recoil direction for the most predictable recoil possible. In addition to this, the Summoner's already got very high handling with its most ideal role, so perhaps doesn't need quick draw, and gets a free stat boost that isn't reflected in the stats through elemental capacitors, something like much higher stability than that of the Galliard with its ideal role, or even handling if you want to get to those quick draw type levels of maximum handling. Some people mentioned to me that Galliard has sights instead of barrels, and that's a strength to it, when I believe that's actually a weakness to it. People say that you can go for a higher zoom sight to get more range with the weapon, but I think ultimately that does deter the weapon and is unnecessary. Although the Summoner's box sights looks like it might have some zoom to it, it's actually a very low zoom sights with no modifier, which is on par with Suros regime and Hardlight. And Galliard does have low zoom sights available, which if I had one in my ideal role, I would choose those. But again, it loses barrel options as a way to increase the consistency with the recoil direction, and high zoom sights aren't desirable as they make the weapon less forgiving in closer range. They require more input, of course, to track targets because you have higher zoom on them, which I very much dislike, and because of the way that zoom is multiplicative towards the accuracy cone and aim assist cone, they alter where the sweet spot is for the weapon, where the weapon feels most consistent and most forgiving, and I heavily dislike that. Ultimately though, it is personal preference, but if you did want increased zoom or higher range as a result, you could just go for rangefinder on the Summoner while still getting moving target, and still getting all the recoil direction benefits on it. The Galliard has Rampage, Rangefinder, and Moving Target, 3 of the best perks in the same column, and you can't combine those. You can't combine Moving Target and Rangefinder or Moving Target and Rampage, which I think is very disadvantageous for the weapon. Gnawing Hunger is another good legendary auto, and it does have barrel options, but it doesn't have Moving Target, and that's a deal breaker for me. Speaking of Moving Target, why is it so important? I think Moving Target is the most valuable perk on an auto rifle. It increases your strafe speed to help follow targets using your own character's movement, but also be more evasive and even play cover more effectively, which is an inherent weak point of auto rifles. The increased strafe speed gives you better odds of winning gunfights against hand cannons, which are really the worst weapon for auto rifles to go against, because you can be more evasive, and if hand cannons do miss a shot, you're likely to win the gunfight. Or if you happen to challenge a hand cannon and they're playing cover effectively, you can try and pop in and out a bit and disengage more effectively while hugging cover with your auto rifle. Personally, this already has me sold on the perk, but on top of it, you get increased aim assist. That's just free consistency while gaining all of these benefits that you might have just wanted anyways. Even the exotic auto rifles that don't have Moving Target feel like they're lacking as a result. I feel like my strafe is just overall less responsive. And remember, this is independent of the mobility stat. You can go for 100 mobility and have an even more faster or responsive strafe than 100 mobility provides, because Moving Target will quote unquote stack with that. It's independent of the mobility stat. And the consistency of shots landing with Moving Target does feel noticeable as well, even in comparison again to the exotic autos. But it's really the fact that the summoner can get Moving Target while also reaching its 100 recoil direction that matches the best exotic auto rifle's recoil direction stat for entirely vertical recoil and just maximum consistency, which is always what we're looking for. Again, just to reiterate, that big argument for Galliard and having its multiple zoom sights to increase range is not great, because this sacrifices exotic tier level recoil direction stat and consistency. Yes, I know that this does require to use a counterbalance mod to reach 100, but reaching 100 on a legendary auto nonetheless makes it noticeably consistent and feel far better to use. I mentioned Elemental Capacitor, but I'm a really big fan of this perk because it's just a free, pretty significant feeling stat boost. Now, it's pretty hard for me to identify, although I'd like to do it in the future, how much of a numeric value the stat boost is providing with Elemental Capacitor, but again, that'll be for the future. It does feel pretty significant though, and the summoner feels like it's performing at its best with a Void subclass, getting that boost to stability, again outshining a lot of the other legendary auto rifles in terms of stat packages and comparing to that of the exotic offerings. But let's talk a little bit more in depth on how the summoner compares to the exotic auto rifles like Suros and Hardlight being the most popular. As I mentioned many times, the summoner's recoil direction of 100 and high stability, especially with Elemental Capacitor and Void, does make it very competitive. As much as Hardlight has very consistent recoil with 100 stability and 100 recoil direction, and I know now since it got fixed it's only very slight, I still very much notice the jitters and bounces in Hardlight's recoil compared to the sights of the summoner, which stay very pinpoint and accurate at all times, and because of this makes it feel as consistent or maybe just a bit more pinpoint and stable than that of the Hardlight. Overall, Suros Regime does feel less consistent than the summoner, but of course it has the TDK decrease through spinning up and its healing ability. But it is worth mentioning that Suros Regime does have a precision penalty because it has spinning up. With spinning up, it does less precision damage than other auto rifles, giving it a worse TTK without taking into account spinning up. That gives it 8 crit 1 body against a 6 Resilience Guardian for a 0.8 second optimal time to kill, again without factoring in spinning up. The Summoner and Suros Regime both start getting damage fall off at about 28 meters, but because of the precision penalty, the Summoner maintains a better TTK, again not factoring in spinning up though, which will improve your TTK a little further into the magazine. If you happen to miss some shots, it'll pretty much cover you later on. But the point is, the Summoner is very competitive at range with the Suros and feels just as, if not a bit more consistent than it. With Hardlight, however, it's a bit different because a main reason of people using Hardlight is the fact that it has no damage fall off. Although I don't think it makes as big of a difference as you'd think it does. because at 35 meters, just about outside of the aim assist range of hard light, it maintains its optimal time to kill of 0.7 seconds. And the summoner maintains an optimal time to kill of 0.8 seconds, taking 9 critical hits, which isn't exactly the same, but is still again plenty competitive, especially for a legendary auto rifle. And really outside of this range, hard light and autos in general are pretty far outside of their most consistent and competitive space. Not to mention that hard light's lack of damage fall off, although again technically more competitive, or the most competitive offering in this regard for an auto rifle, isn't at all necessary to punish hand cannons, which is the worst matchup for an auto rifle, as either way hand cannons usually lose their 3-tap ability past the 28 meter mark, and their time to kill is punished pretty heavily, where auto rifles can take advantage of having a better TTK even with their own damage fall off. I go back to moving target though, because moving target continues to be the biggest factor and difference with the summoner in comparison to even the exotic auto rifles. It makes up for many inherent weaknesses of auto rifles, and as a result makes them more competitive. Better ability to play in and out of cover, better ability to, again as a result, get back into cover and retreat if needed, improved ability to track targets and follow other people's or opponent's strafes with your player movement to land shots more consistently. Improved evasiveness to even increase the odds of a hand cannon missing their TTK and winning the gunfight as a result. You can stack moving target with 100 mobility for the fastest strafe speed possible, and on top of it you just get a free aim assist boost for even more consistency for landing shots on target. And yeah, I know moving target's available on other auto rifles of course, but the difference here is that I spent the whole video talking to you about how the summoner without moving target is plenty competitive. Moving target is the icing on the cake that really makes this, to me, very competitive and my pick for the best feeling auto rifle to be using. To end the video, just to have a key stat comparison of the summoner to other autos with its best roll, the summoner of course has the 60 range, 57 stability, 62 aim assist, 82 handling, and 100 recoil direction. Compare that to the Suros, which also has 60 range, 62 stability, so only 5 difference, 68 handling, so actually much less handling, 68 aim assist, again in the same ballpark, only off by 6, and again 100 recoil direction. With hard light, we have 46 range, 100 stability, 79 handling, 100 aim assist, and 100 recoil direction again. I know that hard light has a very good stat package, really great, but elemental capacitor stability boost and moving targets aim assist boost and strafe speed boost makes it feel far more competitive with hard light than the stats would suggest, I think. So if you have this, please try it out and tell me what you think. Anyways, don't want to ramble on much longer. Hope you guys enjoyed the video and the discussion. If you'd like to see more of my content, check me out on Twitch, twitch.tv/Drewskys. Link is in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.